Welcome to Beyond Just Business, the podcast for those who want more. More clarity, more direction, and potentially more meaning. We explore the thinking behind success, the habits that shape performance, and the questions that go deeper than profit margins. If you're ready to challenge the obvious and rethink the way life and business work, you are absolutely in the right place.
So, Paul, we've been thinking about this for a long time. I think one of the great things about this opportunity for us to chat is that all bets are off. We're not going to be talking about one specific topic. The goal here is to have an idea or a concept or a question that someone in our network has, and we hit the ground running and see where it goes. So with that in mind, let's talk about confidence. Firstly, when you hear confidence, what does that mean to you?
Some people interpret confidence where I call competence. That's the difference for me. Some people say, actually, I don't have any confidence to do, say, public speaking. But when you break it down and you ask them, because they speak every day, so they can't speak. It's just the fact that they haven't spoken on stage. For a lot of people, it's actually around competence. Once you understand the pillars of competence, you can start to work on confidence. Confidence is very different. Confidence is where you're absolutely sure about yourself. You know who you are. You know what your makeup is. And I've got 3 pillars for confidence: self-love, self-care, self-care, self-belief, and self-worth. Whereas competence is more made up of skills, knowledge, and experience. So 2 very, very different things, but the 2 of them intertwine. But I think when people approach it, they misunderstand confidence, whereas really it's more around competence.
What's interesting about that, and what flashes up in my mind when you talk about that, is almost the idea of talent versus consistency. Which, you know, that intertwining between people assume you have to be really talented to be really good at something.
Yeah.
But the competency is the consistency. When people read into confidence, they assume I'm not a confident personality. They don't realize that it actually is there. It's just a case of getting in the reps, whatever the reps may be.
Yeah. People say that confidence is situational, but it's not. True confidence is that you can actually be who you truly are in any situation. It's just people perceive it as being, but it's not situational at all.
What's the biggest misconception about confidence that you see? Because I think the funny thing is, coming from my space and just as a background in property, confidence can be a delicate dance between being brash, abrasive, and putting people off, or an expert who's very good at what they do. And it seems in my business that it's a delicate dance. But from your perspective, what would be the thing that would come to mind?
I think confidence is more around knowing who you truly are. You see a lot of people being cocky. It's more their personality taken over, or what some people perceive as being their ego. So they're allowing that cocky side to be taken over. So the opposite of being cocky is being humble. You'll get somebody that's extremely confident, but just a humble person. And that's very, very different to somebody that's still the same level of confidence, but they're just cocky. And so that's where I see the disconnect being.
And what's interesting now, when you think about a world where we have a work environment that is, I suppose right now, as of May 25, it's at a crossroads. You have people advocating for in-person. I know recently Dennis O'Brien was in the news talking about advocating for being in the office. You're going to have people absolutely at odds with that idea. What role does confidence play when it comes to the world we live in now? Confidence in a car sales showroom or boardroom is one thing. Online is another. Maybe there's an element of fake it till you make it with the perfect background and lighting, and you can create this ambience. What's your viewpoint on that when it comes to the working world we live in now, or the opportunities and the challenges for people in relation to confidence?
You could ask me on that one. Does confidence tie in with being back in the office or meeting people? For some people, it does, because you get somebody that's, for example, introverted, and they don't like being in the office because they don't like being around people. They're an awful lot more productive working on their own and just put the head down and doing a task. Whereas you get somebody that's extroverted, and they need and want people around them. They get the energy from being people around them. Whereas introverted people get more from just being on their own. That's where self-care is so important for introverts. When they're around people, or even going to a networking meeting or a team meeting, they're attending a lot of meetings, whether online or physically. The very fact of having to interact with other people takes a huge amount of energy for introverts. So I think there's an awful lot at play, but you can still have somebody that's hugely confident attending meetings virtually or physically. The energy will drain from them because of so many other aspects, whether it be introverted or extroverted, or what's going on in their own life, whether they're looking after their own self-care, for example, their own beliefs when it approaches different aspects or different circumstances. There's so much at play that can actually drain an individual.
And what's interesting about that is the words that flash in my mind as you say it are that kind of self-awareness piece, because you could have people that have an ability to do something. Like I always say, throw me in a room full of people I don't know and I'll leave with coffees, connections, and business cards. Sit me down in front of a spreadsheet and I just go, I'm just lost and I'd rather go and wash the car. So when you're thinking of self-awareness, is that something that people nowadays are leaning more into? Because, when things go through a cadence in life, years ago, it was a bit odd if you went to the gym. My late father would have said there's something a bit weird if someone's going to the gym, and then it becomes part of your mainstay. Do you think self-awareness plays a key role in people understanding their confidence, their abilities, what drains them, what doesn't, and how they can kind of lean into that? Or what are you finding?
I would find if somebody is more self-aware, they go on the journey an awful lot quicker, as in the journey for development. There's a lot of people that would come across and they're so opposed to themselves. So therefore they're looking at other people where other people are wrong and they don't find themselves as being at fault. So they'll always be commenting on what other people are doing, but they never actually point the finger at themselves and figure out that they're a part of what's happening. Sometimes they'll get feedback from colleagues, associates, or friends that are you not aware of X, Y, and Z. So something or an event or somebody may make them aware, but they could still continue on throughout their life and not being aware, just being blind to other people. If you get somebody that's completely narcissistic, all they know is that everybody else is wrong and they're absolutely right. So it depends on where they are in the scale. But I think for the vast majority of people right now, and definitely over the last 4 to 5 years, what I've noticed is that there's so much more people starting to go on the journey of self-discovery, personal development, an awful lot more than what they used to before. And COVID was part of kind of the kickoff from that, because it gave people time and space to actually just reflect on where they were in life. You had so many people in that period of time saying, actually, I don't want to continue doing what I've always done. I want to change how I'm doing it in life and the people I interact with and so on. So it gave them that space to do that. And now they're continuing on the journey. Are they continuing on their work? A lot of them haven't. They've set up their own businesses or they're doing a side hustle to the career they have. They're exploring where things are going to go in the future. So a huge amount has changed from that perspective.
And out of interest, do you think COVID or the environment around us in the last 4 or 5 years has accelerated people's thinking, or is it just that it jolted people? We live in a world where we're always moving. There's something always happening. The calendar's always full, and we rarely get that chance to be still. I saw a LinkedIn post that someone was talking about, and it's a Japanese phrase that basically encompasses the idea of spaciousness, like creating that space. Did COVID give people the opportunity, whether they liked it or not, to stop and say, wow, this is great, as in this is an opportunity, where people stopped and said, wow, this is it. I've been traveling for work. I've spent my life in hotel rooms. That was my ideal from a professional point of view. But now that it's all stopped, I'm sitting at home. I don't like the person I'm looking at. I'm not connected to my kids or my relatives or my network. What do you think was the word that comes to mind is almost that mortality. This isn't going to be forever. This is a very short ride in life. And I certainly had it, and I was very grateful for the people I worked with. I think it's very important to learn from others and to grow. But I really had that kind of come to Jesus style moment during COVID when I thought, okay, there has to be more to this. Do you think a lot of people have had that? Or is it almost that fear factor of, if this happens again and I'm in this line of work, what am I supposed to do? Or is it that control piece?
I think what it did was accelerate it. It was going to happen anyway, but it accelerated over the last number of years during COVID. It was the catalyst for accelerating that process. We're all heading to a much more knowing more about ourselves. But I did notice, and a lot of people still go back to their old ways of doing things. They're in the office, they're working the same length of hours, they're still under the same level of stress and pressure, and they didn't wake up and take the time out and say, actually, do you know what? I want to change my life. They didn't do that at all. They went back to the way they were before. Whereas others, the vast majority, I would say, and this is globally, the vast majority did actually take that time out and say, actually, do you know what? I want more out of my life. When I say more, it's not about more success or more money or more capital items. It's more around, actually, do you know what? I want more meaning, purpose, fulfillment, a sense of life, as opposed to working for somebody else. And again, you mentioned the Dennis O'Brien article. That will give you an idea of how some people are thinking or have been thinking in terms of trying to get everybody back into the office. That's just going back to the old ways of doing things, and they're just not going to work anymore. We've moved on, and especially the younger generations, because my generation and older, won't be in the workplace for much longer. So the younger generations are coming up. So as if you take the numbers that are in the workplace, that tipping point is going to reach. So the old school of doing things is going to shift very, very quickly over the next number of years. And the younger generation do not want to work in the same way as, say, my parents worked, whereby, you had a job for life, you gave everything you could to the actual employer and all that kinds of things. That's rapidly changed over the years and will continue to change. We're seeing a massive shift. And if you zoom out on a macro level, you can see that shift happening. And it's phenomenal, but it's where we're going to go. There's no stopping this train. No matter how much forcing you're going to do to try and get people back into the office, it's just not going to work.
Part of me also, I like the idea of it, the concept of change, but it's almost akin to someone who's done what they've always done. And then they introduce almost like a crash diet. Let's say someone wants to lose a few pounds, they do the cabbage soup diet, they lose a few pounds, and then suddenly they're back to their old ways. What do you think the fallout of it will be? Because obviously we're in this transitional phase of old versus new. So you're going to have people that have invested in offices, they've invested in personnel. Let's say that they're all in on that. What kind of messiness are we going to encounter when people are looking at this and saying, well, these are my values and they're rooted in the past. These are your values and they're rooted in the future. Is there that, could the bedding in period be decades? Let's say that transitional piece from, well, this is how we've always done it, to, well, no, we're going to pull you into this way of thinking until the next generation. What do you think the fallout could be?
I think over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see massive change. We think we've seen change so far. We've just tipped the iceberg. Pre-COVID, the thoughts of somebody working remotely, even though many people worked remotely before, it wasn't as highlighted. Technology has moved on, whether you're working on Teams or you're working on Zoom, and that technology was accepted an awful lot more. Like I've been working remotely for, I don't know how many years with clients all around the world. Technology's always been there. So we had the cultural shift from people accepting that it's actually okay to do business and meetings on Zoom or Teams. We've had the introduction of AI. Again, we've just had a different form of AI or a more advanced form of AI coming into play. The capabilities that's bringing is huge and it's absolutely phenomenal. Going forward, we're going to see an awful lot more innovation, creativity, new ways of doing things coming out that we haven't even dreamed of yet. You're going to see all that shift. And then you're also going to see the old ways of how we've done things. And you can see that actually happening right now as regards to what's happening in the stock market, what's happening in financial markets, what's happening in business and so on. And this juxtaposition between trying to get people back into the office. What I would really expect to happen is that people actually need to reinvent, how are we going to do work in the future? That question hasn't been raised yet. So you've got this position whereby people are working remotely, they're working from home, and you get the old school saying, no, there's people working in the office. So it's trying to plug the new into the old, which isn't going to work. But they haven't actually stood back and said, maybe there's a completely new way of work. And what does that complete new way actually look like? It could be, and I thought of this before, whereby we move more towards kind of like the freelancer world, whereby you're working for multiple clients. So you're moving away from being the employee to working with multiple clients. A bit like, if you're a self-employed solopreneur kind of thing, I think it will move more towards that way, whereby now the control has moved from being the employer, and there's an awful lot more advantages to the employer anyway. This whole idea of putting people into a building for 8 or 12 hours a day, the cost, the infrastructure, the cost for businesses is huge just to have that infrastructure. But actually, is it going to make much of a difference in terms of productivity? I think where the arguments are, if people aren't more productive when they're working from home, is that they haven't looked at ways of how they could actually make them more productive. But that's more down to the culture and the trust of the companies with those employees. If it's down to collaboration, then what are the structures that can be implemented to make the team more collaborative and more creative from that side of things? You can meet another individual, you can have a conversation at the watering station or whatever, and will spark off so many other different creative ideas. But how else can that be created without having to be in the office 9 to 5 and having the water station there? There has to be other ways. We just haven't had those discussions yet in terms of what does the future of working look like.
It's probably, I get the feeling of almost this unknown Wild West territory at the moment because of the advent of AI, where it's gone from being a gimmick to something that's now You've got companies that were doubling down last year on not hiring any new humans, as they put it. And then they reverse that a little bit and say, okay, we're going to do the human element, maybe because bad PR or whatever it may be. But when you look at the role of people and the role of technology, at the moment, we're probably at that juxtaposition of that robot's not taking my job. You have that idea of, well, I've done it this way, and you have people that have control. I saw an interesting post last week about a company that banned soft drinks in the office. And someone I follow commented underneath saying, we trust you to do your job, but we don't trust your food choices. And he said, simply ridiculous or something like that. But that to me was indicative of business for people, as in, I've started this thing, it's mine, you're coming in because I allow you. And I'm not saying all businesses like that, but there is that antiquated underlying subtitle of, you're coming into my domain, play by my rules. I want to take the pieces of your personality that I like, your skill sets that I like, but do away with all the bits that are in between. Somehow come to me curated in the way I like. Human beings are messy. Life is messy. A lot of people get fearful of AI and say it's going to take jobs, and someone else might say, no, it's going to take the job of someone who doesn't understand it or know how to use it. Do you see the future of working as almost the mundane stuff being done? Imagine the robot sweeps the floor while you tend to your kids' sports day, or you're into a really great coffee with someone where you can have a great conversation, knowing the mundane every day is still being attended to. But to me, there's almost kind of an underlying of that old way of bartering. I'm very good at what I do in this particular area. You're very good at what you do in that particular area. And maybe there's some element of a currency that comes into play, like obviously at some stage in the future, but almost where people are looking at markets, they're concerned about what's happening, but maybe there's an interplay between Paul has a particular skill set and he can help me with this particular area of my life. And as opposed to swapping it for a bowl of fruit or a basket of potatoes, we're looking at it saying, what's that bit in the middle? Do you think it could be that another version of that? Obviously not, we're not swapping fruit for work, but you know what I mean?
I think we're going to move to a point whereby we are doing more with our life, and the work or the necessity to work will become an awful lot less. That's a bold statement, but that's where I feel it's going to move towards. As human beings, we want to get more out of life. If you look at the generations right now at the moment that are coming up through the ranks, they are an awful lot more sensitive, and they will an awful lot more want more out of life, working for life. My generation above have always put, you got to work to get a life. Whereas the younger generations coming up trying, no, let's have life as opposed to having to work. So they've turned the tables quite a lot. And I would suspect that we're going to have an awful lot more of that. And therefore the AI robots, we haven't even seen robots. I have a robot lawnmower, a robot vacuum cleaner. I can just see an awful lot more robots coming into play. All the mundane tasks, as you're saying, Andrew, be done by robots or AI. Now that frees the mind up to do much more better creative stuff. And the more we tap into our creativity, we can start to drive where we want AI going. And that's what I think you're going to see more of. An awful lot more creativity, a lot more time being freed up to have a life and allow the mundane things or how we function as a human race in have that been done by robots or by AI. So I'm not fearful from AI from that perspective. And then if you look at it, so what would need to happen for that to happen? It's looking at the whole financial system. It's looking at how we do economy. It's looking at how we do business and so on. It trickles into every single thing, but you can actually see those shifts happening on a macro level and on a micro level. And that's just going to continue into the future. I feel it's going to accelerate. Absolutely accelerate over the next number of years.
And do you think this is the classic thing, but the guy who sees he's a successful businessman, goes on holidays and sees the local fisherman having a beer on the beach. If you had one boat, what would you do? I'd catch fish. What if you had 3 boats? I'd catch lots of fish. And then I'd retire so I could basically do what the guy was originally doing. The confidence element that if people knew there were tools and opportunities and ways of understanding how it is they worked and what it is they really wanted to do you think it would encourage more people to be confident and explore competence through the 2 elements of that to explore the life they really want? Because I look at it now and I think, I'm 40. And I remember when I was 18, I had an inkling. I was always good with people because I was sent away to Irish college on my own. I was sent away to French college on my own in France the day before I was supposed to go. And I look at that now and I think that's all layered into my personality. But at the age of 18, I had not a clue what I wanted to do. Imagine if someone had the opportunity and the tools at their advantage that at a young age they could explore what confidence was to them, because everyone's version of winning is different. What do you think the working world could look like if we all, like, obviously democratized, where you and I could both be copywriters and I could be a very good copywriter in a certain area and I will have a certain merit for a certain demographic. What do you see as being the opportunity with where the future is going, on how people can basically lean into that confidence piece, almost be unique rather than being, well, my father was a solicitor, I'm going to be a solicitor? Do you think there's also a relationship between acceptability and the social norm? You know, well, I have an affinity for art. Well, you can't be an artist. You're never going to make any money at it. I have an affinity for X. No, that's not going to work. Get a real job first and then be a hobbyist. Do you think this competence element will enable people to lean into their strengths and actually create a livelihood from it?
It will, but I think it's more got down to individualization. So what I mean by that is that, and it backs up from your own strengths and talents, I think we're heading towards a period whereby each individual will go on a journey to discover what are their strengths, what are the gifts, what are their talents, what are they uniquely really, really great at, and will develop a life and a career or a business or a monetization of how they can actually utilize that. I think that's where we're heading. Rather than having, say, a big four firm taking in, 100 accountants or 100 graduates to become accountants, and they're all pretty much the same at the end of 4 years, I think we're going to move away from that. I think we're going to move more towards, here's what I'm absolutely amazing at, here's what I can do. And now you're showing off those strengths and talents and gifts that every single individual has, their own unique set, and it's leveraging off that unique set. I think that's where we're moving the world towards, as opposed to just being the same as everybody else.
Well, it's that thing, when you're younger, you want to be like everyone else. When you're older, you realize that to be an individual. What would be one thing that you would ask someone to reflect on or explore if they were in a position that they didn't enjoy or felt there was something like an itch they wanted to scratch? What concept or idea or thought would you leave with them so they can start exploring that?
All right. So this might be quite deep. I come across so many people that are in a job or a career, they absolutely really detest it. They don't like it, but they're still there doing the same job day in, day out. The only thing that's really holding them back is finances. It's the only thing that's holding them back. So they're like handcuffs to the individual, but the individual knows they've got to leave that environment in order to explore what it is that they absolutely love to do. And I'm not talking about passions. I'm talking about, how can they leverage off their strengths, their abilities, their talents, their gifts, and how can they leverage off that in order to give them a sustainable income that's really going to give them the lifestyle that they can absolutely have. So I know they can have it if they put the effort and work in, but it's those handcuffs that are really on so tight that people won't take that move, won't take that shift. This isn't just to try and get people out of companies. It's not about that whatsoever. Where it's more come from is life is short. So short. And really, like, how long do you want to stay in the company or what it is that you're currently doing? Really not enjoying what you're doing. How long are you going to stay there before something creates the event whereby now you've got to leave that position and you're forced to do something else completely different? I'm a firm believer of you've got to do what you absolutely love to do, and you'll make the money work in some shape or form. My encouragement will be to reflect on how much of a life do you want to have, and what is it going to take in order for that shift to happen before you start having the life that you really want to have living. Because life, believe me, life is so short. You want to literally grab every single day you can out of life.
I think it's take the active role rather than the passive role, because we all assume we're stepping on a conveyor belt, but what if it's your own race and you get to set the pace? That's not to rail against businesses and companies. I think there's dynamic entrepreneurs, there's companies that can change the world. But I think the opportunity for people here is just stop and say, what is it I want? And how can I create it in whatever way? Because it's all an unknown anyway. Jim Carrey famously said his dad took a safe job, but he really wanted to be a comedian, and he lost his job anyway. And that to me resonates, where I think, well, give it a go and see what happens. We'll touch on it in later episodes, but I think that's a good place to round it off, Paul.
And that's it for another episode of Beyond Just Business. If it gave you something to think about, or it helped you see things a little differently, we're delighted. But make sure you're following so you don't miss out on the next episode. Stay curious, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.